Well, it is good to see you all today. I want to start out my sermon today just to reassure you all that I am, in fact, Pastor Neil. There will be no Pastor Paul jumping out from behind closed doors. No twin shtick today. Or is it? Just kidding, it is. For those of you who weren't here last week, I have an identical twin brother who is also a pastor. And he came and preached with me last week. So we had a lot of fun, but don't worry, he is not here today. Today we will be talking and continuing our sermon series on real presence. And what we've been talking about is how God shows up in the world in different ways and how we use different lenses to see God. And the lens that we use today is the story of the prodigal son. Now, this is maybe my favorite, not maybe, this is my favorite parable in all of scriptures because it feels so deeply relatable. And I want us all to do a little exercise as we start today. I want you all to close your eyes for 1 second. Go ahead, close your eyes. Now, I want you to take a moment and in your mind, picture the rebellious one in your family. Picture the rebellious one in your family. Okay, now keep your eyes closed. Now picture someone in your family or your friend circle that is incredibly warm and generous and graceful and giving. Picture that person. Hold them in your mind for a second. All right, now keep your eyes closed. Now finally, I want you to picture the elder son in this story. Picture someone who you know who follows all the rules. Picture someone who you know who follows all the rules. Okay, now, go ahead, open your eyes. Open your eyes. I bet that it took you absolutely no time at all to pick out those people in your life who fit those categories. In my mind, it's instant. I already know. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I'm not going to call out my older sister, okay? Not going to do that. Not going to do that. But I bet you can picture them with no trouble at all. So, this is the story. Today, we hear these stories, and today is the story of this younger brother, this boy. And he rebels against his father. He thinks he knows everything that there is to know already, so he asks for his inheritance early, and with this newfound wealth, he goes and spends frivolously and recklessly, which is why he's known as the prodigal son, right? The word prodigal, all it is, it's an adjective which describes someone who spends lavishly, right? Or spends or gives lavishly. And hold on to that note for a second. Because this is also the story about a father. It's a story about a father who is generous and full of grace. You can actually use the word prodigal to describe the father as well, because the father is prodigal in the sense that he gives this inheritance away early when he doesn't have to, right? So you could call that reckless even if you want. But he generously gives that away, and as we learn later in the story, he also gives grace rather prodigally, right? He gives it lavishly to his younger son. And the main part of the story plays out between these two figures. The son goes out, he spends all his money foolishly, he realizes he's made this enormous mistake, he comes into this destitute state in his life. And he goes home, he decides to go home and beg his father to take him back, not as a son, but as a servant in the house. But it says in the text, while still seeing him coming from far off, his father runs to him and embraces him. He gives him the biggest squeeze you've ever seen in your life. And he yells, give him a ring, give him a new robe, kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a big party because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. This is one of the most moving scripture verses, I think, in the entire Bible. It's actually a unique story in the Bible. You can't find, there are not similar stories found in other religions or anything like that. This is a story very unique to Scripture, very unique to Jesus. It's a story about God's grace for God's people. This is a story about God welcoming the sinner back into his arms. And frankly, I've read this story so many times, and every time I read it, I feel like the parable should end right there, right? It feels like it should be complete, except it's not. Except it's not. There's one more character in this story that receives very little attention, both in the story and in our retelling of the story, and it is this guy. This guy. That character is the elder son. Now, the elder son is the rule follower, the one who has done everything by the book his entire life, the one who dutifully stood by his father this whole time. Maybe, or maybe not, you feel like you are the elder son. Some of us, we go to church every Sunday, or maybe you write thank you cards on time every year. And you're helpful and kind, you're polite and you're patient. So when you see all this go down, let's go back a little bit. So when you see all this go down, you see how extravagantly this good-for-nothing wayward son is being treated, you feel envious. You get mad. So you say to your father, "Father, I have done everything right my whole life, but you have never even given me a little goat so I can celebrate with my friends. But when this guy comes home, look what he gets. He gets everything. He gets a ring. He gets a robe. He gets new sandals. He gets a celebration in his honor." I don't know how you interpret the elder son, but I find this to be a very real reaction. I can understand how he's feeling. Maybe you can too. But even more than that, I think this is actually the reaction that we have as a society as a whole a lot of times. One of my favorite examples of this, it's kind of a strange one, but it's the story of the Norwegian prison system. Has anyone here ever seen photos of a Norwegian prison? Yes, there we go. Okay. These photos up here, these are photos of a Norwegian prison. Up in the right-hand corner there, you can see what looks like a college dorm room, but nicer, right? You can't see because it's kind of blocked out by the picture-in-picture there, but there's a flat-screen TV above the bed. There's a desk there, this nice window seeing to the outside. You look in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a climbing wall and a basketball gym, 2 hoops. I kind of want to go play on that right now. I kind of wish we had that in our youth wing. Right? You look out here, you look at the bottom, there's that little picture, that's the prison. It looks like a resort in the middle of Norway. And then that big artwork on the left, that's just art that's been made to inspire the prisoners or something like that. It's kind of wild. Right? Some of these Norwegian jails, some of these prisons have been called by the press and others as incredibly luxurious. Luxurious. And if this is what a Norwegian prison looks like, frankly, I don't think it looks too bad, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm going to commit any crimes to get there, but if I did, wouldn't mind. Now, and I want to compare that for a second to prison photos of the U.S. Look a little bit more like this. Words that would come to mind here are scary and dark, dirty, not nice. And you might be thinking, like, what is going on here? How is this on the right, the Norwegian system, how is that punishment? How would that deter anyone from committing a crime at all? Well, it turns out there's actually an interesting story behind this. There's an interesting story behind this. In the early 90s, the Norwegian prison system was actually much like ours in the U.S. They had roughly a 70% recidivism rate, which means that 70% of released prisoners recommitted a crime within 2 years of being incarcerated. So this was about roughly equal to the U.S. Unlike the U.S., though, the government officials in Norway, they saw this as a problem. So they sought to address this issue through a series of reforms under this idea that instead of punishment, the main goal of their incarceration system was going to be rehabilitation. They wanted prisoners to reintegrate into society. So along with upgrading their prison facilities, they allowed prisoners freedoms like the right to vote, to attend school, to learn new skills, to exercise, to see their families. They even got to participate in extracurricular activities like yoga. Right? Under the idea, all this is under the idea that if you treat someone with dignity and give that person opportunity, that they would be less likely to commit crimes in the future. Now, from an outside perspective, it might seem like Norway is going overboard here. Like they're treating these people a little too luxuriously. I mean, these people are in fact criminals, after all. They deserve to be in jail. There's no questioning that. Now, don't raise your hand or anything, but let's do a little internal. We'll do a little internal check-in, right? Think for a second about if you feel like this is maybe a little too much. Like it feels a little maybe overboard. We've gone too far in the other direction. Well, regardless of how we feel about this, one thing is for sure. This has been extremely effective for Norway. Since the implementation of this new philosophy in their judicial system, the recidivism rate in Norway has plummeted from 70% to 20%, which is the lowest in the world. So only 2 in 10 prisoners wind up back in prison within 2 years. Again, compare that to 7 in 10 before. And after 5 years, it only goes up to 25%. Think about the dramatic change that made. Within 30 years, this philosophical change from punishment to rehabilitation dramatically changed outcomes not only for the prisoners themselves, but for society as a whole. Because it turns out when there is less crime and there are more productive citizens, then everybody feels safer and that the whole society is better. Everyone gains, everyone benefits when the prodigal son comes home and is treated with prodigal grace. Like the elder brother, we wonder why the father treats the younger son so lavishly. So the father explains it to us and says, "Child, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." He's like Mufasa in The Lion King. All that you see, all that the light touches is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. And here we learn the father's motivations. Number one, he loves his sons, both of them. Right? We hear that, "Child, you are always with me. All that is mine is yours." He's saying that to the elder son. And I think that comes through very clearly. But number two is we learn that the father is actually not about punishment. A lot of times we think that's the role of the dad, right? The dad is going to be the punisher. The father's role is not punishment because punishment does not lead to change. But grace does. Right? Love does. You know, it's ironic. You would think that people would be recommitting crimes like crazy just to get back in jail in Norway. That place looks nice. It's like vacation. And conversely, in the U.S., you would think that people would do everything they could to avoid being imprisoned here. But that couldn't be farther from the truth, because when you tell someone that they are worthless, they might believe you. They might believe that this is the place that they deserve to be. But when you tell someone that they are priceless, when you put a ring on their finger, when you bring them new clothes and throw them a celebration in their honor, you set them free. Thanks be to God who sets us free and reminds us of our brother's worth.